مرة أخرى، ما رأس المال الفكري غير الملموس؟ وما هي الدول الرائدة في مجال رأس المال الفكري؟ هذا ما نثيره في حديثنا الثاني الذي يحمل عنوان رأس المال غير الملموس غير المفعل وأيضا الفكري، ونحظى فيها بحديث من البروفيسور ليف أدفنسون، أستاذ رأس المال المعرفي في جامعة لوند في السويد.
Happy Thursday. Happy future. And how many steps are you going to go forward this year? You have made 6 steps since last year when I was here. It's very impressive. Soon you will be on the same level as Sweden, where I'm coming from. Then we will have a competition. So I will talk to you about the subject of intellectual capital. It's the unseen wealth. And this is the front cover of a report that is almost 25 years old. And it was delivered by Brookings Institute, which I sponsored at that time in US. But the message is the same as today. We have to see something else than Industry 4.0, to see the shopping centers, the big buildings, etc. It's actually in between the buildings. That's where you find the future. And I will give you some hints on how to get there. My background, just for your information, I got an award as the Brain of the Year once for this thinking and this testing or this prototyping. And I also became professor in Hong Kong. This is a wonderful innovation center. When will you have such an innovation center here in this place? Perhaps you could learn from some other places. And down to the right is an award that I got a year ago with United Nations. So the UN as an organization got the award, and I as an individual got the award. I think it's an interesting balance of one little guy and a big, interesting organization. So, just for your mind thinking, the knowledge era is soon to end. So you have to prepare for it. We are moving from the knowledge era, number 4, to number 5, and that's the mind era. And that's why it's so important to learn to see the intangibles, to learn to develop the new maps and the new approaches. And it's extremely interesting. We touched upon it yesterday. You can test it on yourself. How many good ideas have you had this week? You're smiling. So you have had a number, I guess. Yes. And we also learned yesterday that the female brain has more good ideas than the male brain. Isn't that interesting? So that's another part of this new era, of the mind era. The challenge for leadership is actually how do you turn it into a kind of collective intelligence in a global context? Can you put it on a chip? Can you put it into an app? Perhaps. And this is very interesting if you can do that. But it's a big, big challenge. So what I learned from a colleague of mine, he was coming from this city that is called Ragusa. And they had actually developed the urban planning to get automatic ventilation of the city by building in a special way, so you get the winds to run through the city. And this was done 600 years ago. Why don't we do that today with the energy shortage, etc.? But the point that he is making and was making is think differently. So how many of you can raise your hand on the question, this week I have thought more than 10 times differently? Ah, very good. What did you do? What did you do to think differently? Very good. And what you can test is actually when you get a kind of response, from someone or a question, turn it upside down, look for a new perspective, a new approach to it. And this I learned as a person when I was in California as a student. Turn it upside down, don't repeat the pages that you have read, because that is what they call recycling. So move forward by thinking differently. And thinking differently is coming to this picture. It shows that already some decades ago, we were leaving the industrial era. Now we still try to keep the industrial era by calling it Industry 4.0. But that is obsolete. So we have to address the issue by seeing something else than the old industrial era. And that is based on investment into intangibles. And intangibles are the space in between. We can have a taxonomy for it. I will show you how you can measure it and how you can work with it. But first of all, observe that we have left the tangible era. The drivers for the future is with this generation called Z. And we touched upon it already yesterday. It's youngsters in the age group born between 1995 and 2008. And that is the youngsters. Those are the leaders of tomorrow that we need to give the platform, the instruments, the techniques, the maps to look for the new values. You can even do an urban planning for Dubai, like this picture up to the right, where you take the components of the brain and turn it into quarters, that they called it once upon a time. There are no quarters in your brain, I can promise you. And if there are quarters, it's probably a disease in your brain or something that has happened. So try to apply neuroscience for the new urban planning of Dubai. And you will look for where is amygdala? Where is the endorphins? Are they coming by the subway? Are they coming in another way? Probably in another way. Do they show up in the shopping centers? Or no, somewhere else. But you have to find it. So the roots for the future is leading to the fruits. So the future is with the roots, and the fruits is with the past. And the past might be called culture. It might be leading to old types of fruits. But the most intriguing dimension is to use your youngsters, Generation Z, and ask them as navigators to go out and look for the questions. So I had a number of people working for me in young age, and they were traveling the world to find the questions, not the answers. While they were traveling, I got some senior people working for me coming back and asked, who is signing the travel order? And the youngsters were already gone all over the world. It shows also the aptitude for searching the questions. They were looking for the admin approach, admin authorization to travel. The youngsters don't do that. Give them the opportunity to get the ticket. And you can do that with Emirates. So, coming to the impact of this, look at this slide. It shows that the impact of national intellectual capital ranges between 17 and 72% of GDP. And those nations that are best in using it get roughly 70% impact on GDP. And that is outside the traditional mapping range. So therefore, we need to develop new maps. And this is the ranking. It's very close to the Global Knowledge Index. And here you can see US, Singapore, Sweden, Denmark, Switzerland, Finland, Luxembourg, Canada, Japan, and Lithuania. What is the pattern here? What is it you see? Any reaction? UAE is not on the list yet. Right. So when will you be on the list? It will probably take a few years, but you will be there with this magnificent input from the knowledge foundation. It takes roughly 10 to 15 years to move from where you are today to the future. We will look into some of the maps. So we can do gap-minding maps to see how the policy is impacting the future. And that is the same kind of approach as the pilots on Emirates are doing. They are looking for the data and the impact. Will it be a hurricane around the corner? Or will it be a storm, a full storm, or perfect storm, or whatever we call it? But we can navigate, and this is the interesting part of it. And navigation is based on that the Earth is rotating. And what is the speed of the Earth rotating? What's the speed? Anyone knowing what's the speed of the rotation of the Earth? It's roughly 1,600 kilometers per hour. It's quite a lot above the speed limit on the streets, roughly 100 times. So you have to actually align to that rotation. But Industry 4.0 doesn't align. So we need to find a new navigation approach. And this new navigation approach takes into consideration these 6 areas: human capital, structural capital, market capital, organizational capital, renewal capital, and process capital. Which one is most important? How many hours can the human capital work? 8 hours? 10 hours? 24? 6 hours. 26 hours. Good suggestion. Actually, human capital cannot work more than 4 hours. Medical research shows that the optimum is 4 hours, but you can shift from 4 hours of doing this to 4 hours over here. And then you can have 3 of them, and then you get 12 hours, and that triples your productivity. Now you start perhaps to see a pattern that you have to move from one type of structural capital, that you could call that structural capital office. And then you move from the office to the museum of the future. And then you move to the playing ground with the Generation Z. And then you have 3 different kinds of spaces for your value creation. And that will triple your GDP contribution to the future of UAE. Structural capital. What is that? That is basically all that is left when you go home. Structural capital never sleep. Human capital sleep. So therefore, structural capital is more important from investment viewpoint, from productivity viewpoint, from multiplication viewpoint. So look for the structural capital of the future for Dubai. And the structural capital for the future is not shopping center and big houses. It's something else. It might be the educational infrastructure. It might be the telecoms infrastructure where you are among the leaders. But it also might be the science infrastructure. You don't have a science infrastructure yet. You have to build that. But you have good connections with the Nobel Prize Institute, and that might give you a leverage. So the leverage is in the organizational capital. And that is sometimes also called springboard effect. You know, if you have a springboard, if you jump on it like this, you might get higher. If there is no spring in it, you get high as this. But we have one here that is very good on jumping. Is sitting over there. He's going to present that in the next session, how you can jump even higher than I can. Jan, right? Maybe. He's very good on jumping. So we can go into some of these details later on if you're interested. But you can also summarize this slide. It's coming from Jan. And to summarize it in a few words, human capital go to bed after a couple of hours. Structural capital do not sleep. So if you multiply the human capital with 4 hours input with good springboard effect, you could get 24 hours. That's why the structural capital is most important to measure rather than the human capital. But the human capital is the dynamic thinking, the mind power. And that might lead to new societies. Today we know that there is a tremendously strong correlation between brain business and jobs. So how much brain business do we have here in Dubai? You have a lot of transaction business, but you don't have brain business yet. And that is probably a search area for the future, to look for the brain business. And you can have a look at this research by, among others, Stefan Felster. For Europe, it shows a tremendously strong regression between future and the brain business. How many of you in this room are in brain business? Can you raise your hand? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Only 6 is in brain business. Are you in agriculture or in fishing or sand digging, or what are you doing? The future is in brain business. Move on. Leave the sand behind and the fish. And if you want to do investment on this, if you want to work as a financial planner, you should look into this scale, which I developed many years ago. And it's extremely interesting. If we apply that to the situation of Spotify, we can start to see a pattern. Spotify was stock listed soon a year ago in US. It's roughly 16 years old. 12 years old. Very little company with 3,000 employees. And that is not very much, 3,000 employees. But they have, as you will see, roughly 150 million customers per day. 150 million customers per day. So how do you reach out to these 150 million? The internet. And that is brain business. And the trick is actually totally different to having a linear factory. It's actually interaction through legal contracts to let the music stream. And people describe it as a music industry. It's actually legal innovations together with the publishing of music rights. That is brain business. Legal types of entities that gives the revenue not only to Spotify, but most of all to the publishers of the music. So what you see here, 2,000 employees, 3 billion is in value, and the value to a major proportion is in those, at that time, 140 million users. So this is a way to start to describe your business or your value galaxy. Where is value coming up? It's not coming up in the derivatives of the financial capital. It comes up in derivatives of relationships. And those derivatives of relationships don't even have a name yet. In the case of Spotify, it's new types of legal contracts for music rights. So what kind of derivatives do you have for your own brain? What do you say? You have no idea. So you are in this space of ignorant ignorance or ignorant curiosity. Or the future is with your innovation, but you have to package it in a kind of legal contract. And that is what might be called derivatives, intellectual derivatives. And once you have packaged them, they start to emerge in the trade of ideas. In the old harbor, you were trading with fish. In the new knowledge harbor, you are going to trade with knowledge ideas. but to be able to trade, you need to package it. You need to put a label on it. But it's not the traditional statistical indicators, standard industrial classification. It's something else, and we have to work with that. And that might lead to a kind of value evolution. And as you see here, it's a number of circles. It shows that the value creation is done in between human capital, structural capital, organizational capital, innovation capital, etc. It's this kind of mixture. It might be called curry in some cultures, where you blend the spices of value creation. And this is a way to do it. There are other ways. But the situation for you is to realize that UAE is down to the left side of the corner. And the Nordic countries are up to the right. Yes? Once more.
I just want to highlight that the UAE is 47 years old as a country.
Yes. Yes.
They're going, but actually, I think it's an important.
It could be that it's a young construct. And that's why we don't have good statistical platforms for it. It's a good point. It's a very good point. The statistical input is failing us to do the new maps because they are based on the industrial thinking. So that's why we don't have good statistics. For example, you generate number of working hours, but you don't generate number of good ideas. It's one little illustration of how the old system is cheating us. So to travel from the lower left corner up to the right corner takes roughly 14 years. And if you do it as a kind of gap analysis, then we start to see that one of the very interesting bench learning countries for you is Singapore. 20 kilometers multiplied by 30 kilometers, roughly. And they are very innovative in the ministry development, political development. So perhaps you should develop some kind of smart alliance, but you're also welcome to do that with Sweden. And Jan will pick up on that later on in the next session. So I think you have a little bit of understanding that don't sleep, let the structural capital give you the enjoyment of the future, look for new alliances, look for new maps, invite Generation Z. When did you start to work with Generation Z? Not yet. Tomorrow. Yes. So I wish you good luck with that and say happy future. Thank you very much. We have time for a few questions, yes.
Thank you very much, Professor Evanson. Years ago, my name is Walid Hussein. I come from Saudi Arabia, from the Saudi Arabian National Oil Company, Saudi Aramco. A few years ago, I had the extreme pleasure attending a workshop with you for 2 days on intellectual capital, and as you are fresh, lively as it was before. So,
but I'm a little bit older.
No, but right.
Perhaps not wiser.
No. I think the intellect and the experience that you brought to that workshop still amazingly and with great insights. I have just one simple question. Corporate, and I come from corporate, and I claim that this pertains to many organizations in the GCC. Sometimes they struggle with the concept of defining knowledge management. So you have management or leadership saying, let's have a knowledge management strategy, let's assign and appoint a knowledge management officer that could look into things like intellectual capital, research and development, innovation, entrepreneurship, talent, and what have you. And still, there are struggles in defining knowledge management, how to measure it,
yes,
and how to establish a line of sight between these aspirational objectives of management and employees to understand and appreciate what knowledge management or IC is all about? Thank you very much.
Very good question. Thank you very much, and a pleasure to see you again. Knowledge management has a tendency to do recycling of the old shit. That's why it's so important that you move on to knowledge navigation. If you do knowledge management of Spotify with the traditional thinking, you will miss 200 million customers, but you will see the 3,000 employees. So you have to open your eyes to see that there are other value dimensions. That's why I call it a value space, a value galaxy. And the new value galaxy is, as Jan Sturesen will show, it's in between. And the connection there, the interactivity, has to be addressed and picked up. So the KM approach was good in the 90s. 15 years down the road, it will be even more challenging. What is the new approach for 15 years down the road? My gray hair will be even grayer. So I wonder what's the best way to navigate into the future. But to navigate, you know, you have to follow the wind. You have to go like this. You can never go straight. Industrial management is trying to turn the world into a straight line. I would rather prefer to see it as a chaos. It's much more dynamic, much more bad. So thank you for a very good question. Good luck with your chaos. Thank you. One more question, then we have to finish. Yes?
Can you explain to us exactly what brain business is?
Brain business, yes. Brain business is actually how many good ideas have you had this week? 10 good ideas probably. How do you turn those 10 ideas into a value? What kind of contract do you have for those? And that is brain business. If you're a musician, how can you get paid for your drumming or whatever you do? And that is a very different approach to traditional labor management. It's idea management. It's idea cultivation. Friends, the future is calling me to Jamal, so I have to end, but I'm happy to come back and give you more details in the future. Anyway, happy future. Thank you very much.